Good morning. Hope you guys are doing all right this morning. This week we're going to continue our work on the Things Fall Apart literary analysis essay. Okay, so Thursday we did some pre-writing where you brainstormed some ideas for the essay and decided which character you wanted to use, and then thought through some of the questions that really will build your essay, the framework for your essay. Now, it's very possible that the questions from the pre-writing exercise could become your body paragraphs. You're not required to write it that way, but it certainly would naturally flow that way if you wish. I'm going to give you guys another graphic organizer to use today that will become more kind of like an outline, kind of evidence scavenger hunt kind of thing. And as I talk through the example, I'm going to assume that you're using the questions from the pre-writing to organize your paper, but remember, it isn't required to do it that way. So let's pull up this graphic organizer that I'm going to post on Edmodo later on today so we can talk about finding your evidence. Okay, because literary analysis paper, you have to have specific details from the text to support whatever point it is that you're trying to make about your paper. Okay, so the topic is to analyze one character's response to the introduction of Western ideas into Igbo society. Okay, you're supposed to analyze who that character was, their own personal and cultural identity before the white man arrived with all these new ideas, and then analyze also who they became after their reaction to it. Then you're supposed to go into the consequences of their reaction to these new ideas. And then finally, you're supposed to discuss how that frames the work as a whole. Thematically, what can we learn? What are the universal truths about humanity that are illustrated by Achebe through his portrayal of a particular character? Okay? So as we see up here at the top here, step one was to determine which character we're dealing with. Hopefully you already know the answer to that. And then step two is to decide the subtopics of your paper and how you're going to organize them. So again, if you're using that pre-writing exercise from Thursday, this is very easy because your body paragraphs, your subtopics are kind of already decided for you. Where right here under subtopic one, you could say, all right, my first body paragraph is who was this person before? And then you go down here to subtopic 2, and you could say, okay, my next body paragraph is who were they after? How did they react to the white man and the white man's new ideas? And then number 3, I could say, all right, so my third body paragraph, I'm going to transition into, all right, what were the consequences of how they reacted? And then it doesn't have the conclusion on here, obviously, because this is just for body paragraphs. But then I could save my conclusion for my philosophical statements. Those statements about humanity and the truth of our existence and things that we might be able to learn because of Nwoye's story or Okonkwo's story. Okay, so that's step 2, is to figure out your subtopics. All right, and I illustrated that if you were following the pre-writing. But guys, it's not the only way to write this paper. If there's another way that kind of flows logically to you and you kind of have your own idea of what this paper can look like, then feel free to go out on your own and do it the way that seems best for you. You're going to write a better paper that way because you'll have more ownership of it. But a lot of times it's helpful to have a little bit of a path to follow. All right, going back up here to our instructions. Step 3, and this is the bulk of your assignment today, is to decide what evidence you're going to include, okay? And your details have to be specific, which really means direct quotes. It's okay to paraphrase, but for this assignment, I would really prefer that you stick with the direct quotes because I really want us to get good practice with writing lead-ins, okay? And then also inserting that commentary. So yes, it says paraphrase details, but I think I'll probably just delete that and say, hey, let's focus on direct quotes for this particular paper. You must cite the page number. Of course you have to, because you have to do your parenthetical citations. We don't want to have any issues with plagiarism. And then the last part of this instruction is you have to have at least 2 examples from the book in each body paragraph. All right, that's easy enough. So you'll just need to go through and at least think through this graphic organizer. If you're not going to physically complete it and turn it in, at least take the time to do something like this to organize your thoughts and to dig a little bit into the text and find that evidence that you want to use. So for my example, we are following the pre-writing so that our first body paragraph here is going to be about who that character was, the personal and cultural identity before the white man arrives. So regardless of which character I choose, I really need to think about what are the most important things for my reader to know about this character, who they are deep down in their soul and their heart of hearts, their values, the morals, beliefs, like what are the most important things that they understand. And in order for me to decide what's most important, I really need to be forward thinking. I need to be thinking about what's coming next, because my next paragraph's about the reaction and the one after that is about the consequences. And I want all of this to really flow, and I want all of my ideas to connect. Okay, I don't want to just like have random evidence in each body paragraph. It's going to be stronger analysis if all of the ideas connect to one another and transition smoothly. So when I think about a character like Okonkwo and who he is as a person and how he reacts to these new ideas and the consequences of that, and I think about, all right, what their two most important things, maybe I would say, all right, I really need to make sure my reader understands his violent tendencies. And so maybe my first piece of evidence really needs to be something from that part 1 section, which really would help me illustrate and make a statement about his propensity for violence. And then I need another one. So maybe the second thing that I would talk about is maybe I would talk about his unwillingness to compromise his traditional values. Okay, he's very unyielding in terms of how he adheres to the beliefs and norms of Igbo society. Okay, and really, typically that would be a very positive attribute to have. But then how's that going to affect him later on when his world starts to change? There are other things I could say about him as well. And, what if I'm doing Nwoye? Then what am I going to focus on? What are the two most important things for me to understand about Nwoye's character that would also help me to understand how and why he reacts the way he does when the white man arrives? You see what I mean by that? Like, choosing your evidence matters. And sometimes I think we get a little bit random, like, oh, I got to have something. And so I want you to be a little more meaningful in your selection of your evidence. So jot down the direct quotes and make sure you have those page numbers. That way you don't have to mess with it later on. And then you'll go on to your second topic once you've found your first. And if your second topic is, okay, after the white man arrives, what was their reaction? Do the same kind of thing. All right, what are the two most important things that he says or does, things that happen that would help my reader understand not only the reaction that my character has, but the significance of that reaction? Remembering, of course, that my third body paragraph is going to transition to those consequences. Okay, maybe it's consequences for that actual character. Maybe it's consequences for other people in that character's life, his family members or his community. There's lots of possibilities there. All right. So again, 2 pieces of evidence per body paragraph is enough. You're always certainly welcome to use more. A lot of people will want to use that rule of 3, and I understand that. It certainly has been drilled in, but you don't really have to go beyond that. Having done your evidence scavenger hunt, you should be in a pretty good place to actually start writing a rough draft of the paper, because each of these should develop naturally into a body paragraph, and then you just have your introduction and your conclusion. And I'll talk a little bit more about the meat of your essay tomorrow. I'll talk a little about intros, things that I want to remind you to include, and I want to talk a little bit more about commentary as well, because finding these direct quotes for your body paragraphs is really only part of the battle. I was going to say half the battle, but it's really not even half, because if you're analyzing something, then, probably a good chunk, 2/3 maybe, is going to come out of your head, where you're interpreting what this evidence really means, how it's significant, why it even matters. Like, who cares that Okonkwo had violent tendencies? Who cares that he was unyielding and unwilling to compromise his traditional values and beliefs? Like, why does that matter? You see, that's all going to develop as we go. And it's important as a writer that we're stopping to explain that to the reader. Don't just assume that the reader knows why it's important and why it matters. It is your job as the writer to explain that to me. Assume that I've read the book, so you're not over summarizing, but don't assume that I just naturally get it. You explain it to me, and then you will have done your job as a writer in a literary analysis paper. Okay? Now, this particular assignment is another one of those assignments that you can turn in through Edmodo or not. It's totally up to you. Again, I would highly suggest that you at least think through it or do something similar on your own to help you organize your ideas. And then we'll be working on rough drafts and final copies throughout the rest of this week. Okay, so this will pop up on Edmodo here in a little bit. Okay, and I think that's pretty much it for today. I'll be back on tomorrow to talk more about those other elements of the essay writing. And for now, you guys can just continue gathering your evidence and building the details that you want to use in your paper. All right, have a wonderful Monday, and I will be back tomorrow.